I've created this great presentation, which I'm going to whiz through for you in probably 5 minutes, filled of all these wonderful statistics about why the digital economy is so important, about what in regional areas we should be doing differently, about what percentage of Europe isn't making the most of this, about how much money we're losing as a result of this. But let's be honest, particularly those of you who are students. I remember sitting in lecture halls, listening to talks, and maybe it was just me, but sometimes we get information overload. And we see statistics after statistics after statistics. And suddenly they all blur into one. So instead of you being able to leave here today with the real core messages of what I think this is all about, which is encouraging you to have the confidence and the ambition and the perseverance and the tenacity to go out there and be and fulfill your true selves, what you really want to do, you walk away thinking, all these numbers and statistics and what does this all mean? And then you forget it all tomorrow morning. And that shouldn't be what this is about. Those statistics are important, so I'm going to talk through some of them very, very briefly, but then I'm going to stop my presentation. And I'm going to do what most good entrepreneurs do, is they pivot. And so what pivot means is that, as you heard from Charles, sometimes you start a business like he did with trampoline systems, and then he had this big office, and the markets collapsed, and what was he going to do? Well, he could have either failed, or he could have pivoted. So pivoting is, in business, realizing that you've come to a dead end and you either get stuck or you have to try to find a new direction. And as you learn, as you grow as an entrepreneur and a business owner, you realize that you have to do this almost on a daily basis. So today is no different. I'm not here running a business today. I'm here hopefully to impart a little bit of my knowledge and some ideas for you that you can carry forward. But I sat there thinking to myself, you know that presentation that you've been working on all week, Shaa? I don't really think that you should be doing that presentation. It just doesn't feel right. That actually what you need to do is you need to pivot, because actually what this audience really needs is something slightly different. So instead of just turning up and doing what you always do and just create another cookie cutter version of something else, actually tune into what your customers and your clients and your audience actually really needs in this moment. And don't be afraid to pivot. I did check with the organizer that it was all right for me to do this, I just say that. But don't be afraid to pivot. In those moments, it's like a muscle, like, you know, does anybody in this room go running? Anyone? Okay, no, more than a handful of people, okay. This is what I liken it to. When you go running, think how hard it is when you've had a 3-month gap and you're just going to go and start running again. You really don't want to get out the door. You really don't want to do something. And you get out there, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So it's like a muscle. And pivoting is a really big part of becoming comfortable with your failures and your successes. And actually, what it allows you to do is shorten the gap between the two. So actually, it becomes much quicker and easier to turn something that maybe on the surface looks like it hasn't quite worked into something that could be really successful. And there are lots and lots of examples. I'm sure you've heard many of them of businesses that have come up with one idea and it turned into something entirely different. I think probably my favorite is, does anybody know the Post-it note story? Anyone? Okay, I'm going to share it with you. So hands up those of you who've used Post-it notes. Come on, everybody must use Post-it notes, right? So as an entrepreneur, my house and my office is filled with these great big huge Post-it notes that I stick on the walls, and we go around and we do mind maps and do all this creative stuff. I should have probably stocks and shares in the company. So I love them because I think they're such a great invention, because it allows creative thinking to be shared and to be sparked, and it's just a really great way to collaborate and to visualize your ideas. But Post-its didn't start off as being Post-its. Post-its started off because somebody was trying to invent something that was even stronger than super glue. And they invented this glue and it just wouldn't stick. And whatever they did, it just wouldn't stick. And what they were doing, they were testing it on paper to see, could they get different materials to stick together? Could they get plastic to stick together? No. Could they get wood? No. Could they get no? They finally put it onto some paper, and they're trying to, by the process of elimination, figure out what was wrong. And they put it on the paper, it didn't stick. But what they noticed was it just came off the wall. And and then they could put it back on the wall, and then it came off the wall, and then they could put it back on the wall. And in that moment, what looked like a failure, because that certainly wasn't glue that was stronger than super glue, they created a probably hundreds of millions of dollars of an industry. So sometimes when we're in those moments where it looks like something's really not working, actually, you've just got to hold on to turn around the corner. So I'm afraid I've done my presentation in Keynote for those of you who are the Mac users in the room. Okay, so I've had to do the clicking because the clicker doesn't work with Keynote, so I just want to run through this. It's all around the digital economy, obviously, and this is what we're talking about today. I am going to fly through this because I want to get down to the nitty-gritty of my experiences and how I hope I can imbue some of that into your futures and what you can carry forward. The digital economy spans everything. You know, 5-10 years ago, it used to be this kind of like this subset of the economy. But now the reality is it doesn't actually matter whether you're doing something with your hands and you're manufacturing, if you're making jewelry or you're doing photography, whatever creative outlet you have, or you're a full-on e-commerce site, or you're making widgets, or you're a plumber, or you're an electrician, the digital economy affects each and every one of us. And it's how we embrace that that is going to make the difference between mediocre success and real success. And one of the things I loved listening to this morning was, I think, a new definition of success. And so I heard Martin McGuinness speaking this morning, and others, around how the digital economy could allow you to do whatever you wanted to do from wherever you wanted to do it. So rather than feeling like you have to relocate to London or even Belfast or New York, actually you could create your own world exactly where you wanted it to be. Now, whether that's Derry or it's somewhere else, I think what the digital economy really does is gives each and every one of us freedom. It gives us freedom for our creative output, but it also gives us the freedom to create a life and a business that we actually really love. I think this generation, in some ways, is carrying the burdens of previous generations from a financial and economic perspective. But I think that this generation is potentially the luckiest generation to date. And I'll tell you why. Because for the first time, having lived through the financial crisis and the repercussions of that, I think this is the generation that truly understands what it is that they want and the value of their real lives. And that's not to go to work for 60 years and then retire and die 2 years later. It's not to go and fulfill somebody else's expectations of who they are. It's not that just because you're good at maths, you should become an accountant, when really your passion is art or photography or graphic design. That this is, I believe, the first generation who has truly wholeheartedly embraced what previously might have been thought of as those hippie notions, that actually you can go and live in Thailand for a year if you want to, and you can make some really good money creating some really great businesses and products and services. Because this digital economy has transformed all of your opportunities. And sometimes when we're sat here in our own little world, it's hard to understand the reality of that. But you only have to look around you to see how many people just like you all over the world are doing exactly the same thing. So the digital economy is worth around €1 trillion worldwide. It contributes to 8% of the GDP, and it's expected to reach over 3.2 million in the G20 economies alone. 72% of Europeans use the internet weekly. Is there anybody in this room who doesn't use the internet daily? No. So you're in a room filled of digital entrepreneurs, potential digital entrepreneurs, digital natives. This is a generation who's grown up with digital at its very core. And as I said, these stats, they are just stats, but let's look at some of them, because actually they're really interesting. That 60% of Europeans use the internet daily. 62% have a broadband access of more than 30 Mbps. Now for me, pretty much all these statistics are in my presentation. That is almost the most significant, because your access to fast speed broadband is actually crucial to how quickly you can develop as an economy, as a local economy, as a business, and as an entrepreneur. I think most of us will probably have felt at least one time a day the frustration in trying to download something. And if it takes more than a nanosecond, we're already annoyed. And that's because we now live in this instantaneous society where we want access to everything immediately. There are a ton of measures like these that are already in place to really help us progress. But none of this is possible unless you first believe it's possible. And again, going back to the fishing story of Martin this morning, it's really true. You've got to believe that this is all possible first. And oftentimes when you hear speakers, they come on and they tell you all the great, wonderful stories, and they don't really tell you all the difficulties. What I loved about Charles' talk was it was really honest. It showed his whole journey. So I just want to stop for a quick minute or two and give you just a little bit about my journey and what's brought me here today. And I don't say anything to impress you, but more to impress upon you what is possible. Because sometimes what happens is we become our biggest obstacles. Because in our minds we decide what's possible based on what race we are, what gender we are, where we live, where we've been to school or we haven't been to school. And whether we like it or not, we often make judgments of other people before we even know them, based on those things. And so oftentimes when I do a talk like this, I'm very conscious that to the outside world, it can seem that I've had things easy, because it seems like I'm super well connected. And I've had this history of really great interesting experiences. But what you don't realize is the story that's behind that. So on the one hand, I was very fortunate to have grown up in the States, more fortunate that I lost my American accent. I came here when I was 11, and I was put down a year into my quote-unquote normal age group, because in the States I'd been very progressive school, I'd been put a year above my group. When we came back to the UK, we had absolutely no money. And when I mean no money, I mean we were on a council waiting list for 2 years. And in that time, we lived in what they called a hostel for homeless families. And so at that point in my life, I was American with a stupid American accent, and I was 2 stone overweight, and I was 11, and I couldn't tell a single person where I lived for fear that even more than being taken the piss out of that I was fat, overweight, and had a stupid American accent, I would now be found out that I didn't even have a home to live in. So I used to get off the bus a mile before where we lived, and I would travel that mile back home, constantly turning around and checking that there was nobody following me so that nobody could find out where I lived. And we shared a 10-foot by 12-foot room with myself, my mum, my brother, and we lived there for the best part of 2 years, sharing a bathroom and a kitchen with 5 other families. And I learnt my biggest lesson in that moment, because my mum sat me down on one of those godforsaken pop-up beds with the springs coming through them, and she said to me, "Shaa, I want you to take a good look around you. I don't ever want you to be afraid of taking risks. Because whatever happens in your life, you will never, ever be back here." And that's what I would say to all of you. That life is about taking risks, calculated risks. You're not going to jump out of a plane without a parachute. But it's when we step out of our comfort zone, whatever our comfort zone is to us, that's where the real magic starts to happen. And so I could look back on my childhood and all the turmoil that I went through, and I could have what I call a poor me syndrome. Poor me, my life was so tough. Poor me, we had no money. Poor me, I had to work every Saturday and every holiday since I was 13. Poor me, I've never had a single penny given to me by anybody. So everything I've ever got is because I've earned it. Or I could say, lucky me, that I actually know how the real world works. That lucky me, I can actually appreciate how hard it is for the vast majority of the population, not just in this country, but in other countries. And actually, lucky me that I get to really appreciate the real value of life. And actually, really lucky me, because in that moment in time, I decided that I was going to pursue a career in what I wanted to do to be true to me. Because for those of you in the room that are students, pursuing something that is your passion is just as important as pursuing something that you're good at. Because when you can find that cross-section between your passion and your strengths, and you focus all of your energy and your efforts on that point, you will make money. Interestingly, when Charles was speaking about his background and he was referencing his time in the jazz band or how he was touring Europe or doing these other things and how these led to different business experiences, he used an example of how he had spent a year on the Scilly Isles, and actually it was watching the communities there that actually gave him the foundation for trampoline systems, watching how they integrated. And I thought that was fascinating. It reminded me a lot of the Steve Jobs story. Some of you might know this and some of you may not, but I think it's worth reinforcing. Steve Jobs, super intelligent, Harvard grad, decided to take a calligraphy course. And nobody could understand, why would you take a calligraphy course? You're like a science major and a mathematician. Why are you taking a calligraphy course? But a few years later, he said it was that calligraphy course that actually was the foundation for Apple. Because it was understanding the design of things, not just the mechanics of them, that allowed him to build a company that today is the most profitable company in the world. So sometimes you think, well, how does this make sense? How does going living on the Isles of Sicily make sense to build a software company? But oftentimes you're going to find in your journey that the strangest of things make sense. So the background to all of this is that whilst we have all of these great systems, including Waterfy, which brings us here today, the reality is that despite the fact that the EU is one of the most digitally forward-thinking regions in the world, we are still behind. Only 2%, this is insane, only 2% of businesses take full advantage of digital opportunities. 41% of enterprises in the EU are non-digital. I can't even comprehend how that could happen. And I think you're going to hear some interesting stories on the panel from companies that actually aren't traditionally digital, but how they use it. And so for me, this is about how do we embrace all of the more traditional companies? How do they embrace technology so that technology isn't seen as something just for a particular type or group of people? Technology is seen for what it should be, which is an enabler. Technology and the digital platforms that it creates should allow you to reach out to more customers all over the world. They should allow you to work from Thailand or Poland or anywhere you want to work. But until we learn how to actually fully embrace these technologies, we're always going to be behind. 20% of people in the EU have never actually used the internet. So I think I wanted to put this stat in to get some perspective on where we all are here today. I doubt there's many of us who can actually remember a time when we didn't use the internet, because it's been such an integral part of our lives. 47% of the EU population has insufficient digital skills. 23% has absolutely none at all. 39% of the EU workforce has insufficient digital skills. And 14% have no digital skills at all. This is crazy, because what this means is that businesses are unable to use simple things like search engines to find their suppliers, store digital information, provide customers with FAQs, interact with their customers on social media. This is such a key element to how, as customers and consumers, we all now expect to react with the people that we're buying products or services from. What about selling goods online? I mean, selling goods online is just this huge opportunity no matter what your marketplace is. My background after my boxing was I was very fortunate. And again, it picks up on Charles' stories, and I think that you guys are going to see this in your own careers, in your own futures, is that often as an entrepreneur, when you look back, your life seems like a series of random chance encounters and coincidences. So when Chris Eubank retired from boxing, I had a very strange in terms of, there was no reason that the meeting should have happened, with a guy called Sir James Dyson. Now at this point, nobody had ever heard of him. He had just won a lawsuit against Amway. And for those of you who don't know the Dyson story, it is the story in tenacity and truly believing in yourself and your product. Because James had gone to every single manufacturer only to be told that his product was rubbish and it would never work and nobody would ever buy it. He'd gone to every bank and every single bank turned him down and told him, nobody will ever buy a vacuum cleaner without a bag. Every private equity firm, every venture capital firm, everywhere he turned to, they all said the same things. Your product is rubbish and nobody will ever buy a vacuum cleaner without a bag. So being turned down by everybody will make 99% of us probably give up. It would probably make even me give up. But he didn't give up. He went to the States, he licensed his technology to a company called Amway. And 2 years later, they infringed his patent and started to bring out their own line, but using his technology. So the only thing that he could do was sign his house, his family home that he lived in, over to the lawyers in America as collateral because he had no money to pay their fees. The short story is he won the lawsuit against Amway, and he won $3 million. And that $3 million funded the company today. Anybody know how much Dyson is worth today as a company? Guesses? 11 billion? That's quite a specific guess. It's a £1 billion company. Any idea how much James Dyson is worth today? He's a billionaire, sterling billionaire, not a dollar billionaire. Any idea how much of his company he still owns? 100%. And he owns 100% of his company because everybody had told him it was rubbish. And I spent 5 years working with James, starting around a kitchen table, 20 engineers in the back garden. And then I went to Australia, I set Dyson up in Australia. And then I started to fall in love with the internet. And it was probably the hardest decision I'd ever made because working with James was like doing the best MBA you could ever experience. And branching out by yourself can sometimes seem a risk. But what I would say to you is that when you have those opportunities that come across, whether you're at events like this and you see speakers or you hear speakers, or you think there's somebody that you might want to connect with, there's tons and tons of things that I'm not very good at. I don't stand here before you an example of perfection by any stretch of the imagination. But there are a few things that I think I am world class at. One of them is never missing an opportunity. So if I was sitting in this audience today and there was somebody in here that I wanted to connect with, I can guarantee you, by whatever means necessary, I would find a way to make that happen. Because you don't get these opportunities every day. So when you have an opportunity cross your path, you can't stand in the sidelines. You can't stand over here watching what's happening, thinking, I really want to go and talk to that person, and not do it. You have to walk out to the center stage. You have to grab those opportunities with both hands. It would have been super easy for me to have thought when I was 21 that I couldn't possibly work in boxing. What on earth did I know? I was studying economics at the London School of Economics, and I suddenly found myself being the first female boxing promoter. Probably the best gig I've ever had in my life, certainly the most fun I've ever had. Equally, how was I properly prepared to work with somebody like Sir James Dyson? But it's in those moments when you have to jump. You have to step out of your comfort zone. You have to jump into the unknown. But that's where your magic happens. That's where great companies come from. That's where you get your pride in what you're doing. That's where you fully realize your real potential. And I say this to you because I truly believe that whatever stats I can share with you, and anybody who wants to get a full copy of the presentation, because there's probably about 20 more slides left, you can email me, info@shaa.com, and I'll happily send you everything. But none of that is relevant, as I said before, if we don't at first believe in ourselves and what this opportunity means for us. And for me, a big part of this opportunity is collaboration. And it's listening to people like Charles, how you pivot and those stories. But I wonder how many of you in this audience are going to connect with Charles or me on Facebook or LinkedIn, the plethora of opportunities you have to find ways to connect with people. And an interesting thing is that I find in life, luck usually comes to those who work the hardest. And that doesn't mean the longest hours. And again, I think this is something really important for this generation. It's not about killing yourself to make money. It's about making the most of those opportunities. It's about putting yourself out there where you can at least find those opportunities. Maybe on your next trip to London, you could go and have a coffee with Charles and check out the trampery. Maybe, if you've researched my background, there might be an idea that you've got that maybe I might be able to help you with. But the reality is, in every audience like this, less than 2% will actually connect with somebody. So whatever we teach you, whatever statistics we give you, it's about what you do with them that really counts. This is a big topic for me because, I don't know, how many of you have got friends that you've had conversations with, and it goes something like this, you know, I want to lose weight, I want to stop smoking, I want to start going to the gym, I want to set up my own business, I want to buy my first home, and then a year later, they're saying the same thing. Obviously, none of you lot would ever say that yourselves, right? I get that. So, again, I don't like being put in a box. So I come from this background. I went from boxing to Dyson and then into the digital economy. I set up the first internet travel company with Sir Bob Geldof in '99, and we sold it in 2000 in those crazy, heady .com days. I then set up one of the first early internet social networking sites called My Kind of Place, and we sold it in 2006 to B Sky B. I've had some wins, I've had some failures, and in between I've learned a ton of lessons. But the lesson that I've learned the most is that when you're really true to you, understanding what makes you happy, that crossover between your passions and the things that you're really good at, your passions and your strengths, that's where you get the real leverage. And it's about building those relationships over periods of time and reaching out to people before you need them. So if you're thinking that you might need to raise finance in a year's time, don't wait for a year to start making contact with the people who might be able to help you. Don't leave it till the last minute to send an email to somebody because you want their help next week. If you're thinking about raising funding, the best time to do it and to create those relationships is now, well in advance of actually needing anything. So for me, this story around the digital economy is that whilst it's clear that there's all these opportunities of things that aren't happening, we're not able to do all of these things if you don't understand how to use the digital economy. Businesses are missing out. This point here, work remotely with other outsourced people. This is going to be such a crucial factor for anyone either running their own business right now or thinking about setting one up. Leveraging the digital economy to work remotely with other people so you don't have to have the overheads immediately, as we did maybe 10, 15 years ago in a full suite of staff. That actually you can do outsourcing, but you can also do what we call near sourcing, which is that you don't have to outsource to India. You might be able to near source, like if you're based in London, you could near source to somewhere in Lancashire, in a little village where somebody loves living there, like you love living in Derry, you don't want to move, so you can create now in this new digital world, in this new digital economy, you can create a lifestyle where you don't have to live in a city, where you have to pay 5 times the price that you would here to live in a nice home. And as long as you have sufficient broadband access and transport and roads that take you to the city would be helpful. It's another little bugbear, because we can do all these great things on the digital economy, but if we don't have the infrastructure in place, if we don't have the real grassroots logistics and infrastructure in place, it seems a bit bizarre to me that we can make all this headway in this new sector over here, and yet the old-fashioned road systems or transport systems can still hold us back. So these conversations can't be had independently. You can't have conversations around the digital future over here and conversations around transportation over here. They need to be joined up thinking, because this is about how do we bring the future together. and your ability as entrepreneurs to be able to outsource, bring people in from all over the world, gives you so many opportunities that businesses didn't have even 10 years ago. I am conscious of time, so I think I've probably got about 5 minutes. I am really easy to find, though. You see, when you have a name like Shaa Wasmund, you can find me on the internet pretty easily. So it is costing everyone by not maximising these opportunities. For every single one of you here, there will be a way that you can utilise digital and technology better than you are today. I know I can. How many people in the room, actually let me ask, from a work perspective, who'd like to quickly just share their favourite app? Anybody who's got a favourite app that they use for work? Come on, what is it? Dropbox. Dropbox? Okay. What was yours? Dropbox, okay. Wunderlist, like Wunderlist, yeah, like that. Sorry? Box, yep. Any others? Asana? I use Asana, yeah, love that. Any else? Twitter for social media, for reach, yep. I mean, I used to be a real skeptic. I was a big Twitter early adopter. I used to be very skeptic of Facebook. And then somebody showed me the errors of my ways. And I can tell you through Facebook alone last year, we probably did over £200,000 worth of business through Facebook. So, and that's not, we spent zero money on advertising. We didn't even do Facebook ads. So it's just really understanding where the land lies. But there's one app that nobody is recommending. Anybody else have any others? LinkedIn? Any more? Google Drive, yep. Any more? Come on, there's my favorite app. Nobody's mentioned it. Which one? WhatsApp? Oh yeah, I love WhatsApp. I'm not sure that's a work thing though. I think WhatsApp is a distraction thing, but I love it. Sorry? Okay, yep, no, I like that. Feedly. Yeah, love that. It's beautiful. What was that? Oh. Was that the gentleman next to you with his phone?
No, it wasn't.
No, it definitely wasn't you. Okay, does anybody use Evernote? Nobody uses Evernote. Okay, this is the value of my entire talk today for you. There is an app called Evernote. Please write it down. I have no shares in the company. I'm not paid for them or anything by them or anything like that. But this is where I really think you bring the digital stuff. You have all this big picture stuff out here, and we talk about all these statistics and these numbers, but bring it right down to what does it mean to us today. As small business owners, if you use things like Asana to track your tasks, it just saves you so much time and hours. And as entrepreneurs, we have so many things going on in our heads. You need to be able to take them out of your head and put them into a list that you can share with other people. Because maybe you've got other teammates who are working in Bulgaria or Thailand or India, or maybe they're somewhere else, or maybe they're your next door neighbor, but you still need to be able to share those tasks. To me, Evernote is the one app that I have to lose. If I had to lose every single app, including my camera off my phone, Evernote would be the one I keep. They have an entirely free version. I'd so recommend it, because what it does is it allows you to take all of your notes from anything you ever do, store them in one place, syncs across everything. But its search functionality, in my opinion, is so much superior to Google's own search. You can never lose anything ever again. You can take pictures of things if you want to, if you find some inspiration for your blog or for your website. If you want to take a picture of a receipt so you don't lose your receipts in the future. If you want to have work chats with colleagues to share documents, I would highly recommend you all use this, or at the very least go and look at it. And I use this as an example because I want to drill down into the minutiae, not just the big picture. Because what today is all about is, what can you walk away with from here and go and do? In 2012, I wrote my first book. It was one thing that I really wanted to do, and I just never got around to it. My book was called Stop Talking, Start Doing, A Kick in the Pants in 6 parts. And it was written for all of my friends who kept having the same conversations with me about getting married, moving to the south of France, losing weight, stopping smoking, and then had the same conversations the next year. And that book became the #1 business bestseller in the UK, not just for a month, but for 14 months in a row. So we literally destroyed every record. I have a plaque at home, you know, like I was a platinum singer, like they have their albums. I have my book, and it's from W.H. Smithson. No other book had ever had that accolade in their history. We beat Richard Branson. Probably the only time I'm ever going to be able to say that, so I use it at every opportunity. And I don't think it's because I wrote a book that I'm going to win a Booker Prize for. I think I wrote a book of the moment. And I think that book is very relevant to this moment and our time here today. It is about stopping talking and starting doing. It is about having the courage to step out of our comfort zones. It is about understanding that this is our lives and we have one shot at this. And if you want to do something, now is the time to take action on it. I wish for all of you, when you leave here today, to just think about one thing that you could do, one person you could connect with, that would take you just that step closer to your goals. Because whether this is about embracing the digital economy, or the latest, greatest apps, or the challenges of transportation, what this is really about is how do we build a better future? How do we build a better, brighter future? And that's not just down to the people here. It's down to all of us. And the only way change ever happens is by taking action. So I leave you with a task to think about one thing that you could take away from here today. One piece of information, one contact, one action that's going to take you just that step closer to your goals as business owners, entrepreneurs, students, and fellow human beings of this world. Because I believe, whilst the digital economy is a huge opportunity, I actually believe the people economy is a much bigger one. Thank you very much.
Really good.